Hi, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in to the Sustained Success series hosted by Brainstorm. I'm Troy, and I'll be kicking us off today. If this is the first session you're joining, remember that this is a 6-part series running weekly through mid-November. We have a stellar lineup of thought leaders in SaaS, customer success, customer education, and even voice of customer. Here at Brainstorm, we created the Sustained Success series to build a space for authentic, meaningful, and unsponsored dialogue around the most critical and current topics in customer success. This is our inaugural run of the Sustained Success series, so we're especially excited to have you here joining us from the beginning. We're looking forward to continuing the series in the future and hope to have you along for the ride. Today's session, Voice of Customer, What's Working, What's Not, and What Your Clients Wish You'd Realize, features Deborah Wilson, VP of Marketing at Brainstorm, hosting our special guest, Andrea Notthingham, former CTO Manager and User Experience at PepsiCo. Andrea launched and led a champions group of 400 plus people to support over 120,000 users globally at one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. She was promoted to work with the C-suite to ensure a top-down approach to adoption, and later moved into operations in the North American food sector to give focused attention to the end-user experience. Andrea's passions outside of work include gardening and cooking healthy meals, including her famous Texas barbecue sauce. We're so glad you joined us for today's session. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Brainstorm Sustained Success series. I'm Deborah Wilson, and I'm honored to be kicking off our session today. We have an incredible guest, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. But before we get started, let me take just 30 seconds, and I'll give you a quick intro to the series. If this is the first session you're joining, remember this is a 6-part series running weekly through mid-November. We started the first week of October. And we have a really, really stellar lineup of thought leaders in the SaaS space, from customer success, customer education, voice of SaaS clients like today, just a really, really solid makeup of contributors. So we created this series at Brainstorm to have real, authentic, high-value dialogue about the topics that keep CS and SaaS leaders up at night. This is our inaugural run of the series, but we are really looking forward to adding additional series to our calendar shortly, ideally in the spring of the coming year. So stay tuned. Let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. Let me give you an introduction to Andrea. So excited to have her here with us today. Andrea is a former CTO manager over the end user experience at PepsiCo. She was at PepsiCo for over 16 years, as I understand it, with the last 7 focused on end user experience and adoption specifically. And I think, Andrea, you started on the service desk right on the front line with end users. So you know the real end user experience, A to Z. And on a personal note, Andrea is a mom, a gardener, and rumor has it that her homemade barbecue sauce is the best out there. So a true Texan. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation in the Sustained Success series, and we're excited to dig in. If you would, go ahead and start off by telling us more about your previous role, your team, a bit about you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to just share. So my team was responsible for, like you said, end user experience. So that entailed software adoption for maybe 30 to 50 applications or so, depending on which ones were being deployed, which ones needed to increase adoption. We were also responsible for updating and engaging our global champions group. So it's at one point, we actually created a champions group all across the globe with a bunch of very excited users. And so, I mean, it was a lot of fun getting to do communications, training, adoption, and making sure that our end users were just truly having a good experience and able to use their software the best of their ability.
That's so awesome. We have so many good things to dig into today. Andrea's voice is so important because she can really speak to what it's like to be on the other side of the vendor relationship. So as we in CS and SaaS are working with our clients, we're wise to be empathetic to the experience of our main contacts, of our points of contact, who are just as driven as we are to successfully get your tools adopted in their organizations with their end users. but whose experience we need to be sympathetic to and really seek to understand so that we can meet them where they are and ultimately drive successful adoption, drive business results from the software they've licensed from us. So Andrea's voice is really valuable and unique here in that, as you've mentioned, Andrea, you were responsible for 30 to 50 applications. And how many end users generally, if you could give a range, did that represent, or did you need to administer that experience too?
Well, when I was on the global side, there were at, around 100,000 or so, something like that. And then when I was focused more on a smaller part of it, it was around 45 to 50,000.
Okay.
So a lot of users.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
A lot of people.
Okay. And how was your team structured? You mentioned 30 to 50 applications.
Mhm.
How was your team structured in a way to handle adoption for all of those applications?
So when I initially was on the team, there was only about 2 of us. It did slowly
Wow.
get expanded out, which was great. And then the last few years, it was just me working with the global team. And I was really focused on the foods division, so just a smaller division.
All right. So with so many applications and 50 to 100,000 end users to administer that experience to, how did you do that? I mean, you're kind of almost a bottleneck in between the success of these applications, right, and the success of them with your end users, and that's a pretty tall order. How did you navigate that?
It is, and you hit the nail right on the head, bottleneck. Because people like me in that position, we can absolutely be a bottleneck because, one thing I think a lot of these software vendors don't really understand is that, there's generally 1 or 2 people in as their customers responsible for all of these different applications. We're meeting with every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had a QBR with every single vendor, that often, that's all I would do, but I was responsible for so many other things. And what we found was, we had a couple vendors who really gave us better resources
Mm-hmm.
that enabled our journey to go a little bit faster and allow us to kind of lead it. One of the things that, again, that some of these software vendors don't understand is they have these goals, they have these metrics that they want to increase, right? So maybe increase some functionality, or in that application, increase adoption of that functionality. Another thing that some of the software vendors don't understand is that when you're one person and you're trying to prioritize with all the vendors, with all of the with their priorities, that you have your own priorities, right? So the software vendors, a lot of times what they do is they'll help you with launch on how to leverage the tool right out of the gate,
Deploy
the tool, exactly, roll out that tool. But each organization uses it differently, right? So they have different use cases. And so what kind of created that bottleneck, to your point, was I needed to make sure that the communications that are being sent out are right for our organization. They're easy to understand. They're not technical, because the IT people, right, they understand the technical. But the business folks, they just want to know what's in it for me,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
How is this going to change? Is this going to take me any longer? And so a lot of what we did is we vetted out. We went through those communications. We went through those trainings to make sure that they had what they needed. So if you can imagine, right, you kind of feel sorry or not feel sorry, but have empathy for me, your customer, when you have these goals and, you want to engage me and you want to get your goals met. We have our own goals as well. And so anything that the software vendors can do to really work with the customer to give the power to them. That was one of the biggest successes that we had, is when we got to lead that adoption and really drive it through and get the data to be able to see that what we were doing was working.
And how you spoke to having goals besides, just the adoption or usage of one particular application, and having responsibilities even outside of application usage and adoption. Could you speak a little bit more to what kind of metrics you had, or how did you measure your success in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to use Microsoft, our Microsoft rollout, our Microsoft 365
Sure.
rollout as an example. When we partnered with the company, with another company to be able to roll out that adoption and see the data on our communications. So first of all, any team that is responsible for deploying those communications, for sending those out, you want to know if they're working, right? So usually your IT people aren't your marketing folks. And so we're doing the best we can to kind of translate it from IT speak, technical speak to business speak. And so I want to know that if I'm going to spend all this time creating these creating these communications, getting them approved, sending them out, that we're going to be able to see that data. So that was number one. Number two was getting metrics on the education. So who is able to, I want to see how many of my users are reading documents, how many of them are watching videos, having that
Actually,
data.
usage metrics.
Exactly. Yep. And it's, normally every single, think about that, right? 30 to 50 applications, each one of them has their own academy, their own university, their own LMS. And so what we were trying to do is we had created an internal portal, and we were trying to pull from each one of those to kind of link them and create one place for everything to live. Otherwise, I have to remember what each one of those sites are. I have to go through, I have to sift through it and see what is pertinent to my users. And so a lot of times, if it's difficult for me to figure out and navigate, it's definitely difficult for them. And so they're going to Google or YouTube, or they're going to search it.
Uncurated places.
Exactly. And who knows, it could be some dude in his basement, just telling him how to do stuff. And I don't have any data on that.
Right. You don't know that they're watching it. You don't know that they're searching for it. You don't know what they need.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, IT is not a marketer, and yet you're tasked often in IT with putting together the communications that are intended to reach end users, get them to see value or benefits of the software, get them to maybe log in and try something new or do something more. I know there are some software vendors who will create communications templates, or they will actually reach out to your end users for you. Did that work? Was that effective? Did you prefer that, or how did that play for you?
Anyone who created gave us like a pre-built communication plan, they were the ones that really got to the top. So you give me a path to say, okay, week one we're going to send this, week one you're going to send this, or week 1, 2, 3, 4, things like that. Otherwise, any of the vendors that would send directly to our users, they don't get read. If you nowadays with all the phishing scams, a lot of people won't even open them at all if it comes from outside of the organization. And so all those emails now have like a bright banner, and this came from outside. Yes, and the pictures aren't downloaded or anything like that, and so they're not reading them. And a lot of the companies now are doing the phishing tests, right, just to educate their users, and so they don't want to get pinged for something. So a lot of those just go in the junk. Some organizations don't even allow them to come through. And so not only does your customer not have the data, I didn't have the data on who was opening them, if they were even working, but really who's even opening them. So I think I saw it was like a less than 1 or 2% open rate on some of those. So, which that's our users aren't reading them.
Right. So they're not reading them. You don't know if they are reading them, even if they are.
Right. I would just assume, they didn't know about a lot of the updates that would come straight from the vendor. They would only really know about the ones that, if we sent the communications out.
So if the comms came from Andrea Notthingham at PepsiCo, for example, the likelihood of that open rate would be much higher.
Much higher. Yep, exactly.
So it's a recognized name. It's internal. It's not getting filtered out. And it sounds like also having a comms plan, not just maybe templates, but having a plan for here's what we've seen with data to
Right.
have proven effective in terms of driving user engagement, user activity with our software.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's correct.
So, Andrea, when you're tasked with driving the adoption of 30 to 50 applications with sounds like 50 to up to 100,000 end users, you have some tools at your disposal to help you get the job done. Can you speak a bit more to what those tools are and maybe what works about them, what doesn't? Share a little bit more there.
Yeah, absolutely. So each of the software vendors provides us with some great resources. A lot of the times they'll have, again, their own academies where they have training videos and PDF forms and all different types of assets to assist us. A lot of times they'll have also any kind of like an external LMS system. And again, the content is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just trying to organize it for my users, right? How are they really needing to understand the tool, to learn it for their use case, and to learn even past that use case, right? So if we don't grow past that use case, somebody's going to introduce another tool and say, hey, can we have this one instead? And then people just aren't going to learn them.
So those tools, it sounds like when you go to the university or the external LMS, the academy, it's great stuff. It sounds like the content's quality is well produced. It's good content for the most part.
It is for the most part. It's the challenge is making sure that it's all updated. If all the content resides with the software vendor, I'm assuming that it's been updated. The only, one of the many problems or challenges with that is it's organized the way that they think people need to learn, which is great. I mean, they own the software, right? They've created it. But a lot of the users, they need to learn differently. So maybe they don't care about some of this other functionality, right? They just want to get into the tool and get started and then do some follow up later on. And so again, it's that organization. The other big challenge is that the software vendor has all the data. So they can see who took that training. They can see who read their PDF documents, these, and really consume these assets and this content, but I don't. And so it's extremely, so again, even though there's great content in these academies and these LMS systems and everything, it's, what I need to do for my users is organize it and kind of pull it all in. And so again, if I am supporting or owning, 30 to 50 of these applications, going to each one of these academies, going to each one of these LMS systems, and grabbing the content that I believe is good for my users, rolling it all up into our system or putting it into reorganizing and getting it over to them, and spending so much time. It's such a manual, it's very time process. It's very time consuming. And then I have to replicate that 30 to 50 times.
So if you want the data, you have to go pull those in.
Absolutely.
If you want to curate it, you have to do that yourself.
Exactly.
And if you want to message it in a way that people will actually read it, you have to do that yourself as well, right? So,
exactly.
So fascinating because, like you said, the content, the quality is great, and probably even the academies, the universities are great. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's then that last mile, right? How can you use that, and how can somebody like you in your role, Andrea, actually use that in a way that you can drive real engagement, usage, and measurable usage, right?
Exactly.
With those products, and how, sounds like you're putting these into your own system. Can you speak a little bit more to that? What kind of a system, or what? When you're pulling those together, what does that look like? Are you uploading? Is it an integration? Are you pulling actual video files? What does that process look like?
Well, what we had is just an internal company portal. And so we would actually create web pages with links and
so your own
quick reference
site
tools.
That you developed,
So
was it a SharePoint site or just your own developed?
We used both. So we had the SharePoint sites, and then we also had just an internal company portal that wasn't a SharePoint site. It was a different tool. But we could create web pages and link things, create articles, news articles, things like that out of it. The problem with it is that people really, even though it had a great search to it, people still wouldn't consume it. That wouldn't be, for whatever reason, that still wouldn't be their first their first go-to, their first inclination to go there first, and not for this content. And so what we really had to do was, for those software vendors that gave us that data, we could actually get that adoption going a lot faster, get the content out to them faster. And so it was more of a push than a pull. And then once they realized where the content was, then they were pulling and they were consuming because they were getting excited.
And why is that data so valuable to you? So being able to host that, being able to curate it, being able to message it, it sounds like, a massive feat to pull that all together. One of the main reasons you're doing that is because you want the data on the back end. What does that data tell you, or why is that valuable to you?
Well, it's valuable for many reasons. So first of all, our executives want data. They want the numbers. They want to understand if we're getting the value out of the software that we purchased as a company, right? They don't want a whole bunch of duplicate software out there. They want to make sure that every dollar is being spent wisely. And I think that's across every single company, any corporate company out there. So that would be number one. Two is time spent, understanding that we're not wasting our time. Getting people to, again, use the tools the way that they should be used. What it did was, once for those applications that we were able to deploy very quickly, we were able to free up some of our time because we weren't continuously training on the same things, kind of banging our head up against a wall, right? We were able to grow, our users were able to grow beyond that first use case. They were able to become kind of pros or champions. We started that champions group, and then it became a word of mouth campaign really globally. So people got excited, and then we really started seeing that value out of that software there. And one thing that I do want to add to all software vendors out there is, if you can't get that message to your point of contact and to your users, somebody like me, I'm a hero if I can find out that we have two different applications that are kind of duplicate, that they have the same functionality. And it's really in my best interest to pick one.
To reduce.
Right?
Yeah.
So not only am I saving the company money, but at that point, I only have one to focus on. And so getting the message out quickly and preparing your customer the best that you possibly can with, and equip them, is going to be really in your best interest.
So Andrea, it sounds like you really have three options when you're trying to drive usage, to drive engagement with your end users. Rely on the product university or academy to send your users to, get the word out. Pull in that content into your own system, your own LMS, or your own tool that you've created, or maybe to create your own content, right? Could you speak to maybe some of the pros or cons of those options? What works or what doesn't when it comes to those options that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So each one of them have pros and cons to them. So let's start with the first one. So the academies and the LMS that they have, that each software vendor has. So again, most of the time they have some fantastic content out there. I don't have to keep it updated. I don't have to organize it, even though it may not be exactly what my users need. It's updated, it's out there. But the cons would be, I don't have the data. I don't know if people are even watching it. I don't know how they're getting educated about this software. And then even if they are, I would have to know, knowing how busy our users are, they would have to get in their computer, open up a software browser, log into that academy.
Proactively go look
proactively,
for it, right?
Exactly. And that's time consuming for them.
And probably not top of mind, if we're being honest, right?
No, generally.
Until they have a problem.
Exactly. So that would be for the LMS or those academies. So again, both those pros and cons there. For pulling that content into our internal LMS, that's great. The only problem with that is I'd have to work with a ton of different teams in the organization, coordinate getting the files from the software vendor if they're willing to even let me have them to put up into our system, or we could link to them. But again, it's writing the articles. It's just very time consuming. And then making sure that we are constantly leading people to the most updated links and sources.
You don't, and you may not even know, right, when something's changed
Right.
until a user tells you, or they don't tell you, even worse, right?
Yep, absolutely. That was probably one of the biggest pitfalls or challenges that we had when we were trying to do that with some of the software vendors. Is we'd link to something and people go, "Oh, this is great," and a month or two later, it would be completely outdated.
Isn't working. It turns into a support
right,
ticket. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then creating our own content. We did do some of that. I didn't have time to train everybody on every single application, but for some of the applications that where we did get some of the great content and were able to scale very quickly, then what we were able to do was kind of add to it. So if we needed to create a short video or create a how-to document or anything like that, just to kind of add in
a resource, yeah,
exactly, and kind of be there for those, just kind of almost like a spot checking, right? Like just kind of sprinkle your own in. But anyway, anytime I had to be the main curator for all of the communications, all of the software training, all of the everything, that's where it would take more time to create it, than keep it updated. So, or a lot of time trying to create it and keep it updated.
So it sounds like you're stuck in a bit of a conundrum, right? You're like, it's vendor. I just as much as you want to be successful with your tool. In fact, I may have put my name on the success of this tool for my end users. And at the same time, you're giving me what you think is the right resource. I'm trying to do my best with it. And we have a last mile problem, essentially, right? Like connecting the dots from content and message to users and actually measuring the impact of that activity on their experience with the software. It sounds like is despite lots of great tools and lots of great content, just not being delivered, not happening, unless you are being meticulously diligent. And it sounds like with a small team, even more challenging.
Yeah, I was very fortunate where that came from, where we had a lot of support. We did have, even though there was a couple of us, in the beginning, there was two of us and we were able to grow, especially where the collaboration tools and the Microsoft tools, things like that, because we were able to scale adoption pretty quickly with multiple tools. We kind of got that process going, and we're asking for some of these things that I'm talking about today. Then we were pretty fortunate to be able to do it. But yeah, most people in most positions that I was in, right, you have a whole bunch of different responsibilities. So a lot of times what we found were that some of the business applications were owned by application owners that were out there in the field or at some of our locations all over, and they were owned by IT folks. They were owned by people who actually used them, which was great, but they weren't IT. They weren't marketing. They weren't communications. They were the folks that were actually using them.
Right.
The problem with that, which is great to have an owner like that, the problem with that is that they were more reactive in support and less proactive because they just didn't have time. They didn't have time to go search through everything, and it was more word of mouth. And when you have a large organization, you need to be able to scale that pretty quickly. But I think that's one thing that a lot of software vendors don't take into account is it's not always IT that's owning your application, and even when they're owning 30 to 50 or more.
Right. And I think I've seen this too, where, like you're saying, a functional group decides to license an application on their own. And they probably are licensing it to solve a very specific challenge that they're having, right? Well, Andrew, in your role, as soon as you see maybe a functional group that's licensing an app, I imagine you're thinking, we already have a tool that does that, or do we already have a tool that does that, right? And so when you have end users who are governing the end user experience in that functional group, I think the exposure to being cannibalized by other applications when there's just such a singular use case is massive, right? If I've bought for only one purpose and my CTO end user manager tells me that we already have something that does this, if I can't make the case for what the tool does beyond this one particular use case, then I'm probably going to lose it, right?
Right.
And so as a vendor, I think being able to find that person and give them the resources to get beyond just end user activation, but a broader picture of what the tool can do, driving not just more usage generally, but broader adoption of your capability of the capability of your tool, and then of course increasing licensing once that case and more of those capabilities of the tool become known, right? Then for a vendor, that risk is mitigated, right, to some extent. Because you worked with a variety of different CSMs from all of the vendors that you were licensed with, I imagine that you had a range of experiences, a range of customer experiences in the way that your CSMs engaged you and approached their relationship with you in driving the success of those tools. Could you maybe speak to some of the ways that those CSMs stood out, and maybe in particular any commonalities they had, those that really were doing an excellent job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the characteristics that probably stood out the most are the people that would partner with us. So I can imagine that being a CSM or being on the CS team, working with your customer and your customers saying, don't go to our business directly, come to us. Don't go to our leadership directly, come to us, right? That it's could be maybe a perspective, yes, or like, I'm trying to bottleneck, or I'm protective, I'm trying to be controlling. No, the real win is when the software vendors partner with us. So my favorite analogy with this is, remember your fifth grade field days, or with the either like the sack races or the 3-legged race. That's actually the one I'm talking about, right? Where it's you and a partner, and your right leg and their left leg, or
hopefully someone you like. Right?
Yes, hopefully, but not always, right?
Yeah.
But if you're gonna win and you're tying those legs together, right, with that, you're becoming that 3-legged machine there. Really being in step with them, really partnering with them. What I found is that those software vendors that really partnered with me, we could go so much faster. So we could get the leadership on board, we could get the stakeholders aligned, we could get that executive sponsor, and we could make our users happier as well too. And so I know it seems easier. Oh, well, I'm just going to go right to the users. I'm just going to send them some emails, or I'm going to contact, some top users, on my own, or I'm going to just go find the executive sponsors, or, I'm going to show them a couple use cases, which is great. But if you want to make sure that you're all together and you're all aligned, bring your customer along with you, because then what we can do is you're not creating friction between us, or between me and my users, or between, me and my executives as well. And so if you partner with me, we can win actually a lot faster.
And could you give some examples as well of how CSMs took that really partnered approach to working with you?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite partnerships, one of the things that CSM really did was try to understand what was my scorecard, right? How am I measuring success? What am I trying to get out of this? What are my goals? Because his goals are to increase adoption and he has his own scorecard,
right?
But really trying to understand what mine are, and what those things are. I mean, that was a huge deal for us. So as an example, one of the things that we were trying to do was reduce duplicate applications. And so he said, okay, so, Andrea, what if we did this campaign, right? And I said, oh, okay, so I can do this campaign, and let's add some pictures here, and let's do this and let's do that. And we kind of built on each other. And I mean, that was to me the greatest example of a partnership. It's a campaign that not only will we always remember, but our users as well. And when you ask the customer, when you ask me, right, the me's out there, what's important to you, we're going to let you know, and we're going to talk to you and really try to partner with you and try to get both of our goals met.
And it sounds like not just asking and then pointing you to existing how-to pages or resource sites, but really getting into the weeds with you and building.
Exactly. I don't know if I specified that, before, but really creating, that was at least what was important to me, is saying, okay, this is what you're scorecarded on. This is where you're trying to go. If we don't have anything, then let's create something. Let's build on something together, and let's get it done.
I love it. And Andrea, what's it like when you do have a CSM who is really engaged with you to the degree that they're not just, maybe pointing you to resources, they're building with you, and they're asking you to try something new or change the way you're approaching your end users, or asking you to roll a new campaign or new initiative out with your end users. What kind of a position does that put you in?
Actually, that's a great question. And I ran into that quite a bit. And it's almost going to contradict something that I was saying earlier, where it can be difficult. It can be a little scary, where the software vendor says, or your CSM says, okay, well, I really think you should do this. And half the time, our default answer is no. Because, I'm just being completely transparent here, because
fantastic.
There could be security risks, there could be security concerns, there could be communication, legal, implications, things like that. And so
your name is on that, right?
Right. My name is on that. This is my job on the line. And so I know that, you want to get this one thing done, or you think this is a great idea. But if you don't come to me with data showing me, hey, Andrea, listen, I think you need to do things a different way. This is a proven approach. Here's the data for it. That was one of the very best things that one of the CSMs did for me. And let me tell you a little bit more about that.
Please.
One time they were trying to get me to turn on a feature in the software to help with engagement. And I just kept saying no, because are we going to have issues with it? Are people going to think it's spam? Or, there was all these different concerns that I had. And when they said, hey, you're going to have the data, so if there's any issues, one, we can turn it off and on, right? So flexibility and the ability to undo something without, things getting all crazy. But the second one was data. And so when we turned on this one little feature, our security team came to us and said, hey, what have you guys done? We've had 3 complaints. I said, well, we sent out 30,000 notifications, and here's the read rate, and here's the this, and here's the that. We had we had the read rate, we had the open rate, we had the click rate, we had the excitement, we had the feedback, we had all this positive data to be able to back it up, so that 1, I didn't get in trouble, and 2, we didn't have to turn it off. So,
and maybe it even made you look good.
It actually did make me look good. And so, I wish I hadn't fought it for like 8 months, but once I was shown the data and the kind of the game plan, then it was a lot easier to be able to roll out and feel secure. So
I think CSMs find themselves in that position all the time, right? If I could just get my client to do this, or if I could just get them to understand this, or if I could just help them, get them to turn this on, right? Then everything would be different. And yet, what I'm hearing you say is it's all about data, right? It's like, I need the insurance policy. I need to know this has worked before. I need to know I'm not your guinea pig. And I need to know that this isn't going to reflect poorly on me if I do this, right?
Right.
So
yeah, if we don't do, if the CSM throws something out there to their customers and says, hey, I really think it's a great idea for you to do this, and we do it or not, right? Their job might be on the line, but if something goes wrong, their job generally isn't on the line, right?
They
If something
kick it to
goes
support.
right, it goes to support, it goes to
Yeah.
some other team.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong and I've done something, my name is on that.
Right.
Right. And so that's where a lot of customers they're going to be very cautious. But
Right.
like you said, data, show them the data, because
Right.
that really mattered to me.
One thing I think about when we're considering the value of data, what I've heard people like you and in your roles, Andrea, share in the past is that data around, are people opening emails, or what are they searching for? What features are they using? Is kind of tier 1 data, right? Like, what are they looking for? What are they doing? And then there's kind of this tier 2, if you will, and why does that matter, right? Or what does that accomplish for us? When in your role overseeing end user experience for large user demographics, in past roles, have you I guess, why does that matter at the end of the day? Why, if they use the software, you got your money's worth, great, but you don't just spend money in hopes that your money's well spent, right? That you use the thing. You want that to do something for you. I mean, that's my experience. How is that, pertinent to your role or your experience?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. We want to understand the value. We want to get the best value out of the software. And it's not just, the return on investment for the dollar amount. Obviously it's all about dollars.
Right.
Right.
Did you get what you paid for?
Right. Did we get what we paid for?
What did you pay for?
Exactly. So what business case are we able to solve? Is it allowing people to work better? Is it allowing them to work faster? Is it allowing them to collaborate more, to get things done? There's there could be multiple different applications that don't talk to each other. Right. And so it could be, the CSM working with me or whoever I need to pull in to help those systems talk to each other. Right. But if we have CSMs that are kind of stay back here or stay at the beginning or just sending links or here that you might find this useful, things like that, then we're going to look for other things, because we need to have the data. We need to be able to show our executives, our executive sponsors. They want to make sure that the software is being used correctly. Not correctly as in like, are you clicking this, but is it being used for the right things? And are we getting the most out of it? Are our people able to do their jobs better because we have it? And we don't need to go purchase other software to supplement, right? Because everybody's using the most out of that software. Yeah,
it's like, it seems like what you're saying is you kind of hit a critical mass or you don't, right? And if you get enough users using it in sync with each other, right, in the right way, it's the go-to meeting tool, or it's I shouldn't say go-to, it is, the default meeting tool, or it is the default chat tool, or it is the default, analytics, right? When more people use it, when you create that critical mass, it becomes even more valuable because it's synchronous, I think, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like, what I'm also hearing you say is usage is what we can measure, but it's a means to an end, right? It's how we can concretely measure the value, but it isn't the value, right? Like you don't buy a bicycle just to see how many miles you can travel on it. If you're a bicycle commuter, you buy a bicycle to get to your destination, to get there safely, to get there without issues, right? And to do the travel that you need to do, right? I don't know if that's a great example.
No, I think it is
along
a great
those lines,
example.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think to your point, I think that is a great example. It's where we keep talking about data, right? We want the data for ourselves because we're being asked for that data. So whether you brought up meeting software, right? So whether it's to reduce the number of meetings or whether it's to increase chats instead of phone calls, or whatever those might be, we're being given business objectives, right? Those measurements, those metrics. And we're being measured against them. If we don't have that data, then how real is it, right? How do we know that all the efforts that we're putting in, day out are even doing anything? And how does our leadership know that anything that we're doing is valuable and really being able to measure against those business objectives as well?
Great. All right, so we are coming up on time, but I want to make sure that we leave listeners today with a couple of really great takeaways. We've already gone through quite a bit that's, I think, super valuable. But if you had to boil down, Andrea, 2 or 3 things that you would want the CSMs or the CSM leaders out there who are listening to be aware of or to know when they're thinking about their client and the customer experience, what would those be?
Well, first, thank you for having me today. This has been so great and a lot of fun just to share my experience. So some of those things would be to partner with your customer, truly partner with your customer. And I'm not talking about just trying to be their friend, right? But truly partner with your customer, find out what metrics they're working towards, challenge them to try new ways to achieve those results, and then give them the data they need to make them willing to take action. So again, before they're going to take action, they have to have that data. We have to feel secure and understood. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, that's so valuable. Thank you. All right, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so valuable to have you on today to share so many valuable insights about what it's like to be on the other side of the vendor relationship and to help CSMs to really build that expertise and empathy for what their contact's experience is, so that they can take a more more seasoned approach, a better approach to engagement with their clients. So we're so grateful for your participation today. We'd love to have you back another time. I'm just going to wrap up the session today. Just as a reminder, we do have additional sessions coming up. We're wrapping up November 7th, so we do have a few more weeks of sessions, and we'd love for you to participate. We have some great speakers lined up. You can see those on our series page. We'll drop that in the chat for you as well. And as a reminder, if you didn't notice it on our registration page, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch. So every session you attend gives you 1 entrance to the raffle. So a little bit of a cherry on top, even beyond what you're learning in our sessions. Thank you so much for participating. We would love to see you in our next session. So we'll say goodbye until then. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's session. We hope you learned something valuable today and that you'll be continuing along with us in the series. As a reminder, the Sustained Success series runs weekly on Wednesdays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern through November 8th. Head over to the Sustained Success series page to register for additional sessions. And in case you missed it, we're giving away a Nintendo Switch to a lucky series participant. You automatically enter the raffle by attending sessions, and each session you attend is an entry in the raffle. Thank you so much for attending today, and we really hope to see you next week when we hear from Mark Troyan, the Senior Director of Customer Success Research at TSIA, and Perry Betty, founder of Tingona.